Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. On behalf of the Vietnam Investment and Finance Association in the United Kingdom, FIFA, I would like to warmly welcome everyone joining us today from the UK, Vietnam, and around the world. Thank you for taking the time to join us for today's webinars. The UK government contracts, opportunities for Vietnamese businesses and entrepreneurs. The UK government spends hundreds of billions of pounds every year on public procurements, creating significant opportunities for businesses of all sizes. However, many SME and overseas-owned businesses still believe that government contracts are only for large corporations with dedicated bidding teams and long-established connections. Fortunately, that's no longer the case. Today's procurement system is increasingly designed to encourage participation from small and medium-sized businesses. With the right knowledge, strategy, and preparation, government contract can become an excellent source of stable long-term growth. And that's exactly why we organize today's webinars. During this session, we will discuss how the UK public procurement system works, where businesses can find suitable opportunities, the common mistake many bidders make, and practical strategy to improve your chances of winning contracts. And whether you already running a business in the UK, planning to expand into the market, or simply exploring new growth opportunities, we hope you will leave today's session with practical insight you can put into action. So it's now my pleasure to introduce today's speaker. We are delighted to welcome Mr. Sandy Boxall, the CEO and co-founder of Contract Fighter Pro. Sandy has many years of experience helping businesses successfully navigate the UK public procurement market. Through Contract Fighter Pro, he has worked with organizations across a wide range of industry, supporting them in identifying contract opportunities, developing effective bidding strategy, and winning more public sector work. And what sets Sandy apart is his practical approach. Rather than focusing only on procurement rules and regulation, he helps businesses understand how buyer thinks, what makes a strong tender submission, and how to build a sustainable pipeline of government contract opportunities. And his experience has helped many SMEs compete more confidently, improve the quality of their bid, and use public procurement as a long-term growth strategy. And I'm sure many of us are looking forward to learning from his experience and hearing his practical advice today. So before we begin, if you have any questions during the presentation, please post them in the Q&A session. And we will leave time at the end of the session to answer as many questions as we can. And without further ado, it's my great pleasure to welcome Mr. Sandy Boxall, CEO and co-founder of Contract Fighter Pros. And Sandy, thank you very much for joining us today, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Christine, for that excellent invitation. Xin Chao, hello everybody. Delighted to be here and delighted to be working increasingly with VIFA. Should confess, I have a Vietnamese wife. I have a real interest in the Vietnamese community, and it's really nice to be kind of more involved in some of the successes that Vietnam is having at the moment. So it's lovely to be here and share my 25 or so years of experience selling to the UK public sector. I think it's a great time for Vietnam. I think a great time for Vietnam generally, but I think it's a great time for Vietnam to get involved in the UK markets that I think potentially companies in Vietnam wouldn't have considered before and probably couldn't have bid into before, but now can. So hopefully we will look at that today. Hopefully you'll learn something interesting, and any questions, we can take them offline and we can talk about how practicalities can work, because there is always detail. If you could go to the next slide, and I'll just talk a little bit about me and where I've come from. So I founded my business that I run now about 6 or 7 years ago, after about 20 years working with the public sector. I worked for companies such as BAE Systems, you may have heard of that, a large defense company, and PA Consulting, which is one of the top management consultancies into UK government. Personally, I have sold something around £500 million worth of work over the years, mostly in IT and related high technology sectors, but not exclusively. Right now, we work daily with smaller businesses and some bigger businesses, to be honest, and we help kind of demystify and make things easier for customers. Now, we started out helping UK businesses, But when we added our Vietnam practice, we've started helping Vietnam customers, and also we've helping UK businesses sell into Vietnam and access that market as well. There's a lot of trade, I think, that can happen that hasn't happened yet. We've got some really exciting opportunities running at the moment. We've actually helped some Vietnamese, well, one specific Vietnamese manufacturer put in a £100 million plus bid for UK public sector. We put that in a month or two ago. It will take a while to know the answer. The bigger the bid, the longer it takes to find out if you've won. But I think it's a really good bid, and we're crossing our fingers for that one. About the business that I created. So we started off doing a few things. One is an online service that can help you find those opportunities that are out there. That can be really cost effective for a smaller business. It'll help you find the opportunities to bid for, work out what to do, and get to the answer as quick as possible. We've also written a AI bid writing software, specifically for SMEs to take the pain out of bid writing where you can't afford your own bid team. Adjacent to that, we have a team of bid writers and specialists, because sometimes you want a specialist to write a good bid. And our extended team have got sales of about £2 billion worth in their track record and their career. And we wanted to work with people who knew exactly what they were doing and had the track records to prove it. And we've talked about the Vietnam advisory practice. That is really exciting, helping businesses trade in both directions. If you can go to the next slide, please. So firstly, why the UK public sector? There are some really big headline numbers. So we're talking about 400 billion and more every year. It's actually 434 billion pounds in the last financial year was spent by the UK public sector on goods, works, and services. That is a lot of money. It's actually 1/3 of all public spending goes to external companies. It's a huge part of the economy. And we see over 100,000 contracts put out for tendering and for bidding every year, ranging in size from billions of pounds to 5,000, 10,000 pounds. So pretty much any business of any size can get involved and can take that seriously. More excitingly, we now have increasingly close trade relations between Vietnam and the UK. So the Free Trade Association from 2021, and we're now members of CPTPP, which I never say correctly, together. And it's really interesting that when you think about, say, UK buying from China, there is a 10% tariff, 12% actually, on most items, whereas from Vietnam, there is no percent tariff. So actually, Vietnam usually is cheaper anyway, but also has a tariff advantage, which is fantastic if you handle it correctly. I also think Vietnam's just doing great. You know, Vietnam's one of the fastest growing economies in the world, great capabilities, really strong at high tech at the moment. I think you grew exports of high tech products by about 50% last year, which is incredible. But you've still got low labor costs, so you can be cost effective in many markets. And actually what we see is UK public sector have historically bought from companies that then went and bought from Vietnam. So garments, and this is a very obvious one. So for say uniforms or PPE, the UK company would tender into the government, they would win that contract, and then they would subcontract the work to Vietnam or China a lot of the time as well. And so one of the things we think is why doesn't Vietnam just bid in direct? The middle layer is adding 20%. Well, somebody should keep that 20%, save the taxpayer in the UK some money. I like that. And then also the Vietnamese company can make a great profit while still being cheaper. That's one of the things that we've been thinking about and why we started that advisory practice. Can you click to the next slide, please? So I thought I would show you some examples. It's all very well saying 400 billion a year, but what? Now, we see 100,000 tenders a year. That's a lot. I think there are some areas where Vietnam has a better chance than others. specifically where that is selling products that can be shipped. Selling services is difficult, particularly if you need to put a team physically in the UK. So there will be contracts for kind of cutting the grass, maintaining buildings. Well, that has to be done here. That is difficult. But selling textiles, garments, PPE, furniture, food products, electronics, components, construction, and increasingly IT and software services, I think Vietnam has a really good angle. And sometimes you might need to register a UK business just as a sort of front end, as a presence here. And sometimes you can sell it direct. The question is really about tax. That's really the big difference. And about does your customer have the need to have a phone number that answers in working hours in the UK? If they do, you need a phone number and you need somebody here. If they don't, you don't. Some specific examples, and I'll go, if I start on the kind of left of the screen, so supplier of workwear. This is actually the British military, the Ministry of Defence. They're buying uniforms and practical workwear for things like chefs and nurses. So all the military chefs who float around the world on the ships need uniforms. That can be easily made in Vietnam, and there's a lot of them. If you look at the price, you might not see, you see in the red thing that says pin around it and the value at the bottom, that's estimating that's between 18 and 45 million pounds over 5 years. That's a good contract to win. If you look at the one below, that is actually a 9-year contract. It's actually more of a framework, so it might have a few different suppliers on it, but that's for 5 billion pounds over 9 years. That's for Northern Ireland. So the whole area of Northern Ireland in the UK will buy its PPE and related products through that framework. Now, if there's a Vietnamese PPE company, they could be on that framework and they could do very, very well for that 8 or 9 year period. Really worth thinking about. You know, you won't get 5 billion. It'll be a fraction of that with other companies, but you could easily look at 50, 60, 100 million over 9 years. That has to be worth some thought. If we go to the bottom, this is a wider UK public sector framework. It's called the Marketplace. It's specifically for a range of sort of smaller or one-off items. So things like office furniture, not the kind of thing you'd need every day, but you need it, you know, every so often you have an office, you need to put desks in it. So you can look to that, and that's a buying vehicle for that. That is likely to be relatively easy to get on. And once on, you'll get access to opportunities that you might have to bid for those, but you get a really interesting angle. And that's $1 billion over 4 years. There's a lot of work in there. Further on the right, again, the next two, I include them, these are military examples because the military tends to buy in bulk. They're one clear buyer, they buy in a clear structure. That can work really well for Vietnam. So the first one, the supply of on-water clothing and equipment, this is actually specifically for the clothing that military or naval personnel need to have when they are physically in cold water, like the North Atlantic. It's quite technical clothing. It won't suit every producer, but there will be some producers out there who can take advantage of it. And you see a suit, a protective suit for the sailor would be about £250 or more for every single one sold. So they're quite lucrative, quite high cost items. And that one's 80 million or so over 5 years. Again, good business to get. Top one, just to show you a different angle, supply of oils, lubricants, and associated products. We actually have one we're tracking for chemicals as well. That's 15 million. That's an interesting one. But this one is those lubricating oils and other related items. It's 35 million over 4 years. And interestingly, with this one, as with some of the other military ones, you have plenty of time to do the bid. It's quite important when you're bidding for something that you have a bit of preparation time. If a bid only has 2 weeks to respond and it's your first one, that is very difficult. The military ones tend to do a warning notice, and then after the warning notice, the tender comes out maybe 6 months later. You want to start reacting at the warning notice so that you have time to get ready for later, and then you can put in a better and more likely to win bid. One of the things we always say is that public sector is it's a longer term commitment. It can take a while for decisions. Bids can take some time to do, but once you get a win, that win will be a big number, and that contract is likely to last for a number of years. You find that the companies that get into public sector are still in 25 years later and just making more money, which is one of the reasons why you'd be interested. Can you head to the next slide, please? Perfect. So kind of how does it work? So every government department, we're talking NHS, local councils, schools, universities, housing associations, police and defence. We've clocked over 6,000 buying entities of various sizes now. A lot of them are quite small and you can maybe ignore them. The big ones like the Home Office, the Ministry of Defence, Ministry of Transport will routinely have really big budgets. The NHS is particularly big. They can all go to market and buy themselves, or they can group with other buyers and buy together. So NHS frequently do that. Universities often in smaller groups. Local councils, again, will sometimes go regionally. So all the councils in Wales can sometimes tender as a group for different things. We do, however, have one clear legal framework, Procurement Act 2023, been live for about a year or so now. It's based on transparency, fairness, and value for money. Price is always important, but it is vital that buyers can show how they've made a decision and how they've got value. And the key is to prove fairness as well, which works very well in Vietnamese companies' favor. You can't be discriminated against because you're Vietnamese. If your bid's good, your bid's good. Crucially important. Where do contracts appear? This bit is confusing. This is actually why we started our Contract Finder Pro business originally, because it was really tricky. There are 50, 60 portals pushing out contract notices. Sometimes they're coming, multiple ones coming from different sites. Sometimes they're different. They've got words different. It is confusing. Our products work to make that easier. And we're very happy to give advice on the best way of doing it. Interestingly, also with that information, we use that collected information over the last 10 years. We have collected every single tender that's gone out and every single award notice that's gone out. So you can use that information to see who has won, when they've won it, and quite often the value they won it at. You can't be exactly specific on those values, but you can get a sense of the range because often the contract value is published at a headline level. That can be really useful because it can help you think about whether you should compete or not. How is work packaged up? There are a lot of different models. Again, we can help with this. Sometimes they're one-off contracts, sometimes framework agreements, which is essentially kind of pre-approved list of suppliers that will last for 3 to 8 years. That's where the government thinks it will get many responders and it wants to reduce the number of bidders to a short list. Getting on those short lists is a really good place to be for winning work. We also have things that are called dynamic markets. They work like frameworks, but they're easier to get on. And you will also get call-off competitions under existing frameworks. It's also worth noting that the government can just do direct awards for certain items. These items would be things that the market can't realistically provide. So if the UK government wanted to buy another nuclear submarine, there is only one manufacturer of nuclear submarines in the UK. The contract's going to them. So they don't run a competition. Most other things will be competed. Can you head to the next slide? So also worth noting that within this, you legally have to compete. You legally have to get a number of bids in. If a procurement officer gets only one bid, that looks very bad on them. It implies they're doing a bad job. If they get 3 or more, they're very happy. So they will really encourage bids from Vietnamese companies, particularly if they're not sure they're going to get 3 bids. So that's interesting to bear that in mind. And we do have one tender that last time it went through, there was only one bid, which is the chemicals tender I mentioned earlier. It's worth about £15 million over 3 or 4 years, and one bidder, and of course that bidder won because there was nobody else. The customer is desperate to see more bids next time. I think that's a good opportunity for Vietnam. So a couple of relevant facts to think about and how SMEs specifically can get involved. So first note, we've talked about it before, but just to say it again, there is no need to be British owned. Overseas owned suppliers can and do win. What's important is capability, financial standing, and compliance, not passports. It is very important, it's essential, to fill in all the forms and all the questions that are asked, and to take it seriously, take it professionally, and give it a thorough answer to everything. That makes a real difference. But once you've done that, anybody can win. Government policy is actively trying to encourage smaller suppliers, like they have done for years. This doesn't always work. Certain things can't be done by smaller suppliers. There's a rule of thumb that says if the value of your contract is greater than 3 times your annual turnover, you are excluded, which is actually sensible when you think about it. But other than that, they actively want to encourage SMEs to bid. Subcontracting and supply chains. This is really interesting for Vietnamese companies, I think. So often contracts will require a larger company to deliver a wide range of services. So they might provide everything from building an office to equipping the office to plugging in the IT services to maintaining the lifts. In reality, that could be subcontracted to a large number of smaller companies. Lift companies are specialists. The Vietnamese companies could provide the office furniture, could provide the coffee for the cafe, but they probably wouldn't do the whole contract. So tracking those contracts can be a really interesting way of getting in, which often has a lower cost of bidding as well, because the prime contractor will be doing the big bid for 30 million. The Vietnamese company can just be quoting for their component. That could be a good strategy. A UK footprint. We've had this debate with a number of Vietnamese businesses. It helps. It's always nice for a UK buyer to get a sense of a team in the UK they can talk to, or a phone number that they can ring between office hours in the UK. It's not essential, and it depends what you're doing. It can also be very small. You just need we've done this. You could outsource the phone number to a UK-based team who just handle a query and raise a ticket. That could be quite easy to do. The other one that is important is to set up and handle tax arrangements correctly. Christine will be, I suspect, very well qualified to advise on tax implications of things. If you get your VAT and your tax wrong, you can get into trouble. That can be expensive. Specifically, you will be charging VAT on your sales. A UK-based business will be able to reclaim that VAT. That could be hugely significant to profitability. If you can go to the next slide. So it's always worth some kind of misconceptions. We hear this quite a lot. We hear this. There's a couple of others I might add as well. The whole only for British. I think we've talked about that already. Lowest price already wins. This is interesting. Price is always a factor. Whoever you talk to, having the lowest price is really helpful. However, there are a number of other considerations. So when you see a tender here, the award criteria will be published. It will say out of 100% what will score you marks. You will often see 10% for something called social value. That could be about environmental sustainability. That could be about helping the poor or deprived areas in the UK. That could be actually about development aid for other countries as well. It is a measure to kind of help the UK and help the world, which is now scores 10% on every major tender. There's a threshold above which it counts, but you see it almost all the time. Then you will see the rest of the marks will either go on quality or on price, and you'll see quite often sort of 60% on quality, 30% on price, and 10% on social value. The more of it is a commodity item, the more price will be a factor. So if it was coffee beans, I would expect that to be very strongly on price. It would be prove you've got this quality, then do it on price. If it's a more complicated requirement, which is harder to assess, say you're doing an IT solution, it's kind of harder to say one is better than the other, and therefore you'll tend to see a higher quality score because that will be more important to the buyer. One question, it's too bureaucratic to try. I get that a lot from UK businesses. It's actually not too bureaucratic, but the first time you do it, you have to complete a bunch of bureaucracy. So what the government public sector is looking for is certification, having the right certificates, proof that you're compliant with rules on modern slavery. Hopefully you've got a carbon reduction plan. Maybe you've got your ISO certification. And they're doing that just to prove a threshold. This is a company that is a good company, it's sensible to work with, and we can prove this with this documentation. The first time you bid, you've got to get all the documentation together. That can take some time and some thought, particularly if you need to get, say, higher cybersecurity accreditations for what you're bidding for, which can happen. You need connections to win. It's really not true in the UK. Sometimes that actually doesn't help at all. In fact, it can make it worse because the customer is trying to prove that your connections haven't helped you. Knowing people in the customer side and knowing what they want, so having relationships so you can write a bid tailored to what they want, that definitely helps. That is just good practice in business development. So you need good advice to be able to do it, but knowing the right person really doesn't help you that much here. Too small, too foreign. Actually, I'd say a very small business, this is a big challenge to do. But most Vietnamese businesses above a certain scale wouldn't find this as difficult as you might naturally assume. Yeah, next slide, please. This is kind of the second half of that piece. What goes wrong? And I've seen a lot go wrong. Sometimes you see bidders try and bid for everything. That's a very silly strategy because you end up getting tired of bidding. Your bids get worse. The team lose and get demoralized and stop trying. This is more of an issue, I think, for UK businesses. There are some directors here who just sort of think that a strategy is bid for everything. It's not. Be selective, bid for things you can win, do your market research to pick the things correctly. And that's one of the services that CFP does, is help advise when not to waste your money. That's a really important thing to know for a business. Never waste money you don't have to. Starting when the tender is published. So we talked a bit before about how the MOD tend to publish information in advance. There is actually rules that recently come out. So Procurement Act 2023 requires bids over a certain value to be pre-advertised. That value is 2 million, and any organisation with a more than £100 million of budget has to advertise in advance for things of 2 million or more. Sometimes they advertise for lower values as well, those that are particularly diligent, but they have to for larger contracts. That's really good because you can go, okay, right, so you're thinking about placing a large order. We can meet the customer, we can do our research, we can attend any industry days or events they're hosting and really understand what it is they want to bid for or they want to tender for, and then we can write a bid or not. So the kind of the best practice advice is look at what's coming, think about what you want to go for, plan ahead, and then when that opportunity comes out, go for it because you've already got a relationship. We would always recommend to do that where you can. Number 3, and this is very true of just as exams where I did this wrong, it is of procurement exercises. If you're writing a bid, you've got to answer the question the customer's asked. You might go and say, well, look, but we're really good at this. This is great. We can do it. Customer hasn't asked about it. It's not helping you. You've got to answer the question they've asked. I've seen so many bids where people have just written down what they wanted to say and they didn't score many marks. That's not the way to do it. The other one is evidence. Now, I've seen this a little bit with some Vietnamese companies. They know they're really good at something. We've got 5,000 people making garments. We're really good at it. And it's really obvious that they are. But when it comes to assessing a bid document, the procurement buyer sitting in a British office somewhere in the UK, they don't know. And you write, we've got all this capability. How do they know that? What you've got to do is you've got to show evidence. So you go, look, we've got 4 factories, we employ this number of people. Last year we delivered 63 million garments. We did this, we did that. And that you can prove it. If you can prove it and show it, you can score points. That works. This is some of those things that when you're preparing to bid or making a strategy, work out and be realistic about what you can bid for and where you're going to be strong. And that's based on evidence. Compliance basics, we talked about this, but you really can't talk about it too much. If you haven't got the right insurances, you don't have ISO, you haven't got your accounts in order, you can't prove that there's not terrorist financing going on, you can't show what's going on. It creates suspicion, it loses marks, and sometimes can be pass-fail criteria. So you won't be fully allowed to bid at all if you can't provide the right documentation. Similar around the world, you've got to do the basics right. Get the basics right, you're in a good place. The last one, we talked a bit about social value. Social value is a tricky piece to do properly. They will set criteria for each bid. There are 5 different criteria, and customer will pick the ones that are most relevant. So that could be supporting deprived areas, helping economic recovery, environmental concerns, etc. They'll guide you with what it is, but then you have to say, from winning the contract, what will you do that will improve those metrics? So let's say it's improving, helping a deprived area in the UK. The clear win is that you say, we will, if we win this contract, create 5 apprenticeships. We will get young people into work in that deprived area. That will score marks. It's clear. Something fuzzy that's not clear, that's not precise, won't score. So, we intend to help some people somewhere. Doesn't score your points. 5 apprentices in Bradford will score points. The same way that for Vietnam, you can say if it's an environmental one, you can talk about solar power on roof. We use half of our power comes from solar cells on our factory roof. Fantastic. Great. We win this contract, we're going to add another 10 solar power cells. Fantastic. That kind of thing can be really powerful. You'll note that some of these criteria are harder for Vietnamese companies to do well on. So if it's improving a local area in the UK, that's difficult from Vietnam. But you'll find that the tenders that Vietnamese companies can reply to tend to be less locally focused. So a local tender might be, I want maintenance on my hospital building in Leicester. Fine. I need a team who are local. That's actually not a good tender for Vietnam anyway. So the fact that the social value will be help get Leicestershire children or teenagers into jobs, well, it's not a problem. Whereas we've seen with the garment tenders we've helped with, there's a lot of environmental social value scores, which makes lots of sense because that's the supply chain and that's not making the world or not damaging the climate any further. So I think these are very manageable for Vietnamese firms. Next slide, please. Here you go. So the process. So the headline message, kind of if you take kind of one thing away from this webinar, I would say the greatest success goes to those companies who have a strategic plan. It's long term. They've thought it through. They're going to back it financially. They're going to spend consistently, not necessarily a lot, but consistently there's a plan. And they all know what that plan is and they've shared it maybe with a UK partner like us. If you plan ahead and you know what you're doing, you will just achieve far greater success. Sometimes we see firms come in and they want to do one thing very quickly. They want to sort of dip a toe in and then go out and we just want to spend a little bit and then we're not going to bid and have a plan. Always have a plan and know why you're doing it. That works much, much better. It's actually true of UK companies as well. We see plenty of UK companies without a plan and they don't do well. It's not It's not surprising, really. Things that you would do in that plan. So define your sweet spot. So what is it you're going for? How big a contract can you win? Where? What is it? What kind of buyers are really going to appeal or going to work for you? Systematically look through the market to work out those tenders and see if they're there. Go, okay, right, we can win, we can bid that one, not this one. And UK tenders are great because even if it's been won by someone else, it will say on the tender when that contract's up for renewal again. Could be a year, 2, 3 years. So you go, okay, well, somebody else won that. It's a 2-year contract. Well, in a year's time or 18 months, we know we get to bid for that again, and we're going to plan from now how we're going to win that. Really good work, really good thinking. You use tools like ours to watch the market. So what's happening, when contracts are coming out, what's going on. You can even look at government policy and political announcements. That can often have a knock-on effect. So pay attention to the market. Engage early. You'll see market engagement opportunities. There are sometimes webinars from customers, events days. A lot of these you can even join from Vietnam. They're online. You can dial in and just see what's going on. Just take you an hour, nice and easy. Get involved, make the customer know who you are before you bid. That's always a good strategy. So when they see the bid come in, they go, oh, right, well, they were nice people. That always helps. And then when you do see a bid, qualify hard. Realistically, can we win this? Can we do all the things? Can we do all the things it needs as well or better than someone else and be cheaper or not more expensive than everybody else? If you can do that, it's worth it and go for it. And because there are 100,000 a year, there are definitely going to be opportunities. If you can do next slide, please. And don't worry, we're getting to the question bit shortly. We've talked about a lot of these already, so this gets quicker and quicker. I'm just making sure the messages get over. So key things to think about: legal and financial readiness, super important. If you're going to have a UK entity, try and think about it in advance so it's not the last minute. Get your accounts in order, your economic standards, tax arrangements. And that also applies to your Vietnamese material as well. Have it all in one folder is a really good strategy as well. I've seen customers they've got all the information, but it's kind of a mess. Insurance, where you need those things, got to go get them. There are some specific things like cyber essentials for data and technical stuff here. That's a cybersecurity standard. JOSCAR is a defense community that you just have to sort of go through and get that set. It doesn't cost too much, just kind of has to be done. Evidence pack, get your evidence sorted out, organize it, get it ready, maybe talk to people, get advice on whether it's good evidence or not, get it up to date, sometimes even get a customer to give you a reference. That can be really powerful. Oh, we bought Essex County Council. Steve from Essex County Council said XYZ company were really, really good. We're really pleased with delivery. That's really helpful because it means that the buyer in the UK knows that another UK buyer has had a good experience. That really takes away any fear or any risk that they might have. Really powerful. People and language, yeah. The bid responses have to be in clear and really good English. Now, we can help with that. AI can help with that, to be honest. It does a good job with it. I wouldn't rely entirely on AI. Be careful. It has to be guided. There's a whole webinar on how to use AI in bidding we could do, but just use it carefully to make the pros read well, or work with a local team to help that bid. And they're not, we have plenty of people who aren't that expensive who we work with who do really good jobs on getting that correct. If you need a UK-facing point of contact and phone line, probably get that set up. Have a social value plan. We just talked about that already. And then delivery credibility. This is really important. Vietnam's a long way away. It's a shame it's a 13-hour flight. I'd love it to be closer, but it's a long way away. So that's not a problem. You just need to be very accurate and realistic about how long delivery schedules will take. If something's being put on a container and going by ship, it's going to take 2 or 3 weeks. But often the supply, that's not important. They just want a container arriving every 2 or 3 weeks. So it just keeps coming. Once the first one's come, it doesn't matter. But just know the situation, know what you can do, have a relationship with a logistics company that you trust and will do a good job, or indeed one that will be trusted by the UK. So I know one supplier who who put a bid in, and they chose the logistics company that was favored by the buyer they were bidding for, because we knew they'd won contracts for them. Clever strategy. You know it's going to be acceptable and trusted. Next slide, thank you. This is the practical first 90 days. It's actually a bit of a process that we use. So we actually do these things called bid preparation days. So a customer sits with us half a day, maybe a day, and we go through everything they need to do, the previous slides, talk about it, get them set up, get them registered, get it all done, write a big list of what to go do, and then they can go do it. Then next thing you go and do, close any gaps you find, build up your evidence material, register on all the portals, pick your target buyers, pick those contracts that are expiring. This is the setting the plan and starting to follow that plan we talked about. Then go and engage. Talk to primes, talk to frameworks, track those engagement notices, and get your first well-qualified bid in and do a good job on it. Next slide, please. There we go. So, of course, I have to say how we can help, and I would, of course, wouldn't I? Couple of different things. The tender search and alert, we have 300 and something customers online subscribing, just getting data. Very sensible to do that. We've got AI tech to write bids, and we talked a bit about that. And we've also got humans who do it. And sometimes you want both. And of course, we do a full Vietnam advisory service. So it is a hard thing to do. Attempting it without advice is really tricky. Like doing anything, I wouldn't try and do my own plumbing. That would go incredibly badly. I wouldn't do my own accounts and taxes. That would go badly. You get a specialist in. That can be a really good strategy, particularly if pursuing a larger strategic contract of tens of millions. You want to think about that and get advice. And that's our advisory practice, works specifically for that. I also really value that we have a team in Ho Chi Minh City and a team here. So we've got fluent Vietnamese speakers, because some things just need that natural language explanation. And when we first started out, we discovered that the word indemnity and the legal term doesn't really have a translation in Vietnamese law. We've got a lawyer who's fluent in both languages. She's Vietnamese, she's brilliant. And she's really, really helpful at helping unscramble any of those legal terms. Yeah, next slide. And that, I think, brings us to the end. So sort of really in summary, very happy to take questions, delighted to answer anything you've got. And I really want to see some Vietnamese companies making hundreds of millions of pounds off the UK public sector over the next 10 years.
Wow, amazing. Thank you very much, Sandy, for such an insightful and practical presentation. And I'm sure everyone gained valuable insight into the opportunities that UK public procurement can offer, and more importantly, how to take the first step toward assessing this market. So we will now move into our Q&A session. Before the webinar, we received several excellent questions from our audience. And I'd like to start with those before opening the floor to any live questions, if that's okay with you, Sandy.
Absolutely. I'm all yours.
Thank you. So the first question that we received before the webinar is it necessary for a company to have a commercial presence or a legal entity in the United Kingdom to participate in the UK public procurement opportunities? Or can a business bid directly from Vietnam without establishing a presence in the UK?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's kind of the first question everybody asks, to be honest, as well. We did cover it a bit in the slide, but just to reiterate, so there is no legal requirement to have a UK commercial presence. You can, particularly for products, so you're shipping something in a container, you can just send it. That will tend to work. However, a UK footprint can often help, particularly if the contract is large or complicated or has a larger sort of service component. So if you think about a buyer here is likely to be a bit risk averse. They want to be sure they've chosen a company that can deliver. And so they're constantly thinking about, how do I take away risk? So having a UK entity with a UK address feels like it's taken the risk out. It isn't actually, because the Vietnamese people are still making the product and it's still getting shipped here. Actually, whoever's sending it, it'll be shipped here. But it just feels a bit better. And so if you need to call them up, if you need to have a conversation, you've got a phone number. And what I think is a really good model is if you've got a Vietnamese person in the UK who's maybe grown up here who has fluent English. That way you can really translate quickly. And actually it's an advantage in timing because Vietnam's 6-7 hours ahead. So you can get a question in at say 4 p.m. UK time, email it to Vietnam. By the time you log in the morning, it's probably answered and dealt with in a way that doesn't happen if it's 4 o'clock in the UK, because then it goes overnight. So it can be really, really helpful. I think the other reason why you might want a UK presence is tax, primarily. We aren't tax advisors, but we can recommend tax advisors. Christine may also know a few. The trick is to get it right. Just don't take chances with it. Don't run risks because you're going to have to pay the taxes at some point. And public sector buyers very aware of that. But actually setting up a UK business, the first question is, do you need one? Well, no. But if I want to set up one, what does it cost? Well, it costs a few £100 can set up a UK entity, and you can start to work a bit with that already. It's much cheaper than lots of countries, which is something I'm quite pleased that Britain's chosen to do it that way. So you could have a whole thing set up and an accountant set up within a couple of £1,000 setup cost to enable you to bid for 10 million. That sort of seems worth it.
Right. Thank you, Sandy. Yeah, I totally agree with you that have a present an office in the UK does help, especially if you're providing services industry. Great. So I'm going to move on to the next question. Have any Vietnamese companies successfully won public procurement contracts in the UK? If so, which industry or sector do they operate in? To the best of your knowledge, are there any examples beyond those that have been publicly reported?
So yeah, this is really tricky. So I know of a few Vietnamese businesses that operate here. Public sector is interesting. So there are very few who have specifically won a large prime contract that is visible in the data. However, there are certainly Vietnamese businesses that are in the supply chains of those prime contracts. So we talked about garments. It's a very, very obvious one. You just walk around retail outlets in the UK and you spot things that are made in Vietnam. It's not hard. We also know that within the public sector that those prime contractors will have subcontracted large amounts out to Vietnamese garment producers. They just won't tell us how much. So we know Vietnamese companies have won more than is publicly known. And it's one of the reasons why I want Vietnam to step up, because I know that good Vietnamese businesses are making the items. They're just not getting all the money from those items that they could do, which is actually kind of annoying for me. Natural fits we talked a bit about. So what are the areas where it's easier? Textiles, garments, PPE, furniture, food. I think increasingly electronics and construction materials and IT services. I am really quite interested in the IT services market. I know it well. If you look back a few years, a couple of Indian companies came here and now have 30,000 staff here. So people like kind of Tech Mahindra, Wipro, huge businesses they've set up. And they set out on basically having decent IT people that were cheaper. I know you can get a fresh graduate out of a great Vietnamese university doing IT for maybe 20% of the price of an IT person here. That's an opportunity that isn't fully being maximized. I'm sure there are subcontractors tendering out to Vietnamese IT companies as well. Again, it's just hidden in the data. So yeah, I think this is the 5 years for Vietnam to step up. And of course, we have two major bids, one of a couple of million and one of 100 million currently with the UK public sector to decide if we've won or not, or if someone else has won. So fingers crossed. And we'll hear about one, hopefully in the next few weeks, and one will take about another 6 months. If if we've got good news, we'll definitely want to share that with you because I think the Vietnamese community deserves to know.
Great. Thank you, Sandy. So I move on to the next question. This is in terms of what type of goods and services are currently open to the Vietnamese business seeking to supply the UK public sector? And conversely, are there any sector or categories that remain restricted or effectively closed to foreign supplier, including Vietnamese companies?
Yeah. So Vietnamese companies will never be excluded any more or any less than anybody else. The UK is very friendly with Vietnam for good reasons. And there'll be anything that anybody can go for, Vietnam will be included. I'm going to take this on the which things aren't allowed angle. So there are certain things that have to be done by UK nationals. And I'm sure in Vietnam it'll be the same. So certain defense items, notably not garments, not uniforms, but IT services, anything that requires security clearances, building weapons, anything involving nuclear, you're not going to be allowed to do that, particularly not from Vietnam. There are certain NHS items as well, particularly things that might have kind of very personal data. And there are certain regimes that, frankly, being in the UK is easier for you to do. Other things which require UK data residency can be really important, which makes sense. If the data has to stay in the UK, then it can't be provided from anywhere else. But almost everything else can be done by Vietnamese businesses. Now, some of it's harder and easier. And actually, we did a little bit of a study to try and work out kind of what amount had been won by foreign-based or foreign-owned firms. And I'm going to say foreign-owned because as we talked about companies, setting up a UK subsidiary, as soon as you create a UK subsidiary, it doesn't look like Vietnam is winning it anymore, but it actually is a Vietnamese-owned company. We think about 30% of the total spend, which, as we said, was 434 billion last year. About 30% of that is going to foreign-owned companies or foreign companies entirely, which I think is a huge number. I kind of was quite surprised about that, but I think it says something very clear about how open the market is.
I think so it looked like that we Vietnamese business do have a fair chance of winning the UK contract, and there's no kind of like restrictions whatsoever besides some of the defense products, which makes sense to me really. So that also linked to my the next question that we received as well. So the next question is, the Vietnam and United Kingdom are linked through the UK-Vietnam Free Trade Agreement, and both countries are the members of Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership. So what benefit do these agreements offer Vietnamese businesses seeking to participate in the UK public procurement, and what key considerations should companies be aware of to make the most of these opportunities?
Gotcha. Great question. Some of this gets really, really technical. So I'll kind of do the kind of layman's view. There's a couple of things. So kind of guaranteed access and equal treatment. I know parts of Europe don't have equal treatment necessarily for Vietnamese companies. I know because we explored one market and we tried to bid and we weren't allowed to. It was in Estonia, I think. So that guaranteed access, any Vietnamese company can bid. Sort of established that. That's partly why. Tariff advantage. So it takes out tariffs on most Vietnamese goods over the phase-in which is applied now. That's really helpful because it makes your goods cheaper in the country, makes it much easier, much more likely to win. I think it also sort of tells a story. So it says very clearly that this is a long-term relationship that will persist. So therefore, if you were investing in either side, that's a sensible thing to do. Things to get right, though, you need to make sure that the rules of origin are correct. So, for example, if you've got a Chinese company in your supply chain, if the Chinese component is above a certain value, that will affect your tariffs. So if it's originated in Vietnam, it's all Vietnamese products, tariffs 0. If I forget the exact fraction, I think it might be 25, 30% is Chinese, then it'll attract the Chinese tariff, which I believe is 12%. And so you need to be very careful about that. But that will encourage more Vietnamese work, which again feels great. Otherwise, it's all about hitting your certification and also meeting UK product standards. That's important. These things have set certain standards for items. You need to be compliant with them. That matters as well.
Thank you, Sandy. So I just want to mention that while Sandy is answering the question, I also encourage everyone in the audience to submit any additional question using the Zoom Q&A or the live streaming Q&A on our social media page. And we will try to answer as many as time allows.
Yeah.
So the last question that I received in advance of the meeting is about, we all talk about technologies and advanced technology, AI. So the question is, the artificial intelligence is transforming almost every industry. In your view, how will AI reshape the public procurement and the preparation of tender submission over the next 3 to 5 years? Will AI create more opportunities or more challenges for SME?
So yes, kind of yes and no actually as well. So first thing, it's AI is kind of a leveler here. You can write faster. You don't need to have a team of 15 bid writers to produce a bid, but also neither does anybody else as well. So it's good for SMEs. You can be compliant. You can get a decent bid. You can do it more quickly. Great. But a bunch of other SMEs can also do that. So there's a really interesting challenge for buyers around the sheer volume of bids they're receiving or likely to receive. So at some point, you're going to start to see buyers assessing with AI as well, just to handle the volume of bids they're receiving. So you're going to get this sort of arms race going on. Exactly where it's going to settle, I don't know. However, what I have seen is a quite savage reaction from procurement on any bid that looks like it's been made up. So the rules of a good bid are the same rules. You've got to have evidence. You've got to be able to show what you're doing. Just because you've written wonderful, lovely words doesn't mean you get any points. If you can evidence it, you can score those points. So if you're using your AI tool as a kind of productivity tool, and you do all your compliance, you do everything properly, then when you get to the bid, you can write quicker. But you've still worked out why you're doing it. You're still qualifying hard. You're still doing intelligent things. Then AI is a real leveler for SMEs and actually larger Vietnamese businesses, because it can help write better English. But just be very aware that it needs to not sound like it's only AI, which is quite hard to do for somebody who didn't grow up in the UK. But you see lots of telltale signs of AI where it's got little things like M dashes and stuff where that's an AI thing, and you go, oh, that's written by AI. So you want to try and avoid those. I'm aware of time, so frankly, we could do an hour on AI in bidding and its long-term implications.
Yeah, I think I agree with you that everyone can use AI nowadays, and people can use AI to assess whether you are using AI to create your application as well. So it's very risky because it reduces the trust on your business if they can detect that you're using AI and there's no evidence to back it up.
Exactly.
Right. So yeah, we are cautious about the time. There are some questions in the Q&A box, but I think most of the questions are already answered by Sandy during our presentation and also during the question that we already asked. So without any further additional questions, we will bring today's webinar to a close. And on behalf of FIFA UK, I'd like to extend our sincere thanks to Sandy for sharing his expertise and practical advice with us today. And I also would like to thank everyone who joined us. We hope today's discussion has inspired you to explore the opportunities available through the UK public procurement and given you greater confidence to take the next step. If you'd like to continue the conversation and learn more about Contract Fighter Pro, please feel free to connect with Sandy and his team after today's session. And finally, we invite you to stay connected with the FIFA UK for more webinars, networking events, and business initiatives supporting the Vietnamese business community in the UK and beyond. Thank you once again for joining us. We hope you have a wonderful afternoon in the UK, a pleasant evening in Vietnam, and we look forward to seeing you at our next FIFA UK event. Goodbye, everyone.